G'day guys, Toz20 here and welcome back to Marble Mountain. No, this is not the new Grand Theft Auto map, but man, doesn't it look like it. When I took that screenshot for the thumbnail, I thought, far out, this is getting me some serious Grand Theft Auto vibes. But this is City Skylines and this is my map, Marble Mountain. I will be making a lot of references to Grand Theft Auto though, and talking about how Rockstar developed their maps. That'll be a little bit further on in the episode. If you are new to this series, this is Marble Mountain in the background, but this whole region is also called Marble Mountain. Now, this series is based on developing up this entire region, not just the big city, which we do have, but we are focusing on developing the entire map, not just one section of it. So let me give you like a little bit of a recap, because we are going to make some big changes in this episode, and I think it gives a good excuse to give you a bit of a recap. So this map is based on California. We are trying to include as many different environments as possible. So we have desert, we have coastline, we have mountains and pine forests, and that's just to name a few, but there's a lot more that I want to include. Now, this is where my references to Grand Theft Auto come in. So when game developers create maps, they're trying to squeeze in as many different features, unique experiences as possible. So when Rockstar created the Grand Theft Auto map, they're trying to put in as much of California as possible within what is a pretty limited space. And that's what I'm trying to do with Marble Mountain, trying to put in as many different experiences as possible. And that's really tricky with a place like California that has such a diverse range of landscapes and towns and cities. That can be really tricky. Actually, hold on, let me just change this view. Disable some clouds, that's better. Okay, so now you can really appreciate how much we have. So you can see how much space we have to work with, and I have to be really clever with the way that I use mountains and I use environments so that I can squeeze in as many different towns and landscape features and environments as possible, which is very similar to what Rockstar does. So what I need to do in the next few episodes is figure out how all this area is going to be transformed so that I can fit in the most amount of unique and interesting features as possible. I also want to put some towns around here, and there are some landscape features that I want to do too. So it's taken about a year and a half to do this much, which is great because I love this series so much and I wanted to keep on going. So we do have so much more to go. This whole region over here is very outdated and needs a complete facelift. And what I mean by that is the transition from desert to pine forest doesn't make much sense the way it looks at the moment. I know it's under detailed, but regardless, we can do better. We can do a better use of space. So this mountain over here, this whole mountain range, there's not much I can do with it. I mean, I can't put a town up here. I can't put industry up here. It's just mountains. So I'm going to move this to over here because mountains on the outskirts work best. Basically, having a mountain like that hides the horizon. Whereas if you were to look over where the desert is, like that's not great. So mountains are my perimeter and the way that I hide the map's edge. So this will be better over here. And because we're going to have that whole space open, I think we can fit in another town, which would be really cool. There's also this area here, which I just like. This is, that was just quick. I didn't even think about doing this. But this is like a little valley, a little gorge. And I think this will be better suited because I would love a little feature, a little landscape feature like this. Potentially over here, because this is just awful. I hate this. I hate this so much. So I think we could actually have this whole gorge like snaking its way around here and ending around in this location where I think we can put some sort of eye candy picturesque lake. I've been watching, I hate to admit this, but I've been watching this really awful show called Virgin River or Virgin Lake. I don't even know what it's called. It's on Netflix. I don't recommend it, but like where it's filmed, it's really beautiful, and it's in the same sort of location. I think it's like on the outskirts of San Francisco or something like that. So I thought we should do something similar like that. Some picturesque town on this lake and this big mountainside over here, or these pine trees and this like big national park area. I think it'd be awesome. So I want to do that around here, which means we're gonna have to say goodbye to probably one of my most favorite builds ever. I actually love this area, but it's not in the right spot. So we're going to say goodbye to this, and we're going to redesign this whole area. Now, I've just spoken about everything we're going to do in the next episode. This episode's more focused on the desert because we need to figure out what this mountainside is going to do, because this plays a really big role with changing the desert landscape to the pine forest landscape. Quite often you'll see a change in landscape, or you'll see a change in climate due to just the mountainsides, or a change in terrain, which is what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be creating this mountain range here, which is going to change the desert to the pine forest. And the way that I need to do that is I need to make it feel like it's a journey going from this to this, whereas it's actually not that big of a distance. You know, you can see some cars driving through. That's not a big distance, but I need to give the illusion that it is. And that's what a lot of Marble Mountain is. It's the illusion that there's a lot of distance between these locations, but really it's not. So we have to work on this. We have to make these much better looking, and probably make it look like the mountains on this side of the desert are going to be like very dry, very desolate, not very many foliage, not much trees, whereas on the other side they're going to have a bit more of a pine forest type of look. So that's what we need to work on. So a fair bits to do over the next couple of episodes. To see what I mean by changes, I'm going to be talking more about these changes in the build, in the time lapse, and then we're going to get into a live play at the end. Alright, big episodes. Let's get into the build. When I first started the build for this episode, I thought that this episode was going to be based around me building this road that was going to snake around the base of Marble Mountain. Thought it was going to be like this really cool, like quite mountainous highway that was going to lead people on like a more of a scenic journey to Marble Mountain / to Montana. But yeah, I didn't really get that far, unfortunately. In fact, I probably got even further, realizing pretty quick that a lot of changes needed to be made to the landscape before really tackling any other project around this area. And I'm really glad that I did choose to take this path rather than just to leave it and just continue working, detailing and dragging out roads and getting too deep into any sort of detail work or building anything that was going to be set in place for a longer period of time, because I think we really needed to update it. And yeah, I have done both episodes, so I've completed both the builds for this area, and I really love the changes, and I actually just can't wait to show you guys. So look forward to them. I think they add a lot to this area, and yeah, it just changes so much. So what I am up to, I am actually deleting a whole bunch of work that I've done in this area. Actually, it's not a whole bunch of work. It's more, it's probably like 2 episodes worth of work that I completed. One of them was sort of like laying down the basis for the mountain and figuring out where some of the roads are going to go. And then the other build was the sawmill that I built, which I really loved that sawmill. I really loved that little place, but it just was not in the right location. So you can actually see me demolishing it right now using Mover, just select most of the area. And yeah, bit sad to see it go, but at the same time, we've got so much more room now to actually work in this area. And I guess that's the thing. We've actually opened up this area so much more by just changing the way the landscape looks a little bit, and just being a bit more precise where I want things to go. I think we're going to open up, well, not just think, I know we're going to open up so much more room for more development and things like that. So just to let you know as well, a lot of this time lapse is, it's mostly terraforming. Around towards the end of the time lapse, I ended up developing this, going into more detail with this path going from the desert to the pine forest. It's actually called Serrano Valley. I don't know why I keep calling it the pine forest, but into Serrano Valley, I end up detailing that road really well, and that's where we do the live play. I'll take on a little bit of a tour of everything we built in that. I really love the way that place turned out. It's actually really, there's a really nice transition, so you'll see that. And what I am doing in the first part is just working on this mountain range. Mountains are very tricky to make in this game, and I ended up watching one of Fluxtrance's tutorials on how he creates mountains, because he does like a really fantastic job at creating these. And basically, I mean, there's a couple of techniques which I'll talk about, but it's mostly time. Like, you really just need to be patient and just trust what you are doing, and zoom in and zoom out just to check that everything is looking right. it takes ages. It's such a long process. And I think the first couple of mountains I do, they're a bit like, oh, like these are alright, I kind of see what you're doing. I get the hang of it towards the end, unfortunately. But I do go back and redo a bunch of these mountains, and they don't really start taking shape, or they don't really start looking like mountains until it gets to adding trees and adding the different textures, using the resources just to paint down the different layers of different layers of color on it. So yeah, creating them like I am right now looks kind of ugly, but they do turn out quite good. So pretty much what I was doing, and I highly suggest going checking out if you want to know how to make these mountains, check out FluxTrance's tutorials. He actually uploaded a couple. He's done one on the he's got a couple on the City Skylines YouTube channel, but he's also done a couple too in the past. And basically just I'm starting off with like just big shapes, undetailed shapes, and then dragging out using very small gradients of pressure on using like the landscaping tool, so that I'm not dragging up. I'm not trying to go too fast. I'm going quite slow with it. And I was most of this starting with the highest point and then just dragging out, I guess they're like spines, or it's almost like the trunks of the tree, you know, just pulling out these different layers. And as they get lower down to the ground, that's where it becomes a little bit more smooth and making a little bit more rough sort of textures above, you know, where the peaks are. And for inspiration, I was checking out a whole bunch of mountains around California. These ones sit pretty close to San Francisco, at least from Google Maps terms. It looks like it's quite close, but it's probably not. But these mountains are very similar to the types that I'm going for. They actually make the transition from what is the redwood forest, I believe maybe the redwood forest, or at least a more forested area, then leading into a more desert, desolate sort of landscape. But again, these sort of desert landscapes have a lot of mountains, which I do plan to have along the edges of the map. Like I said in the live play, the edges of my map are going to be mostly mountainous, so that you do have this horizon of mountains rather than just having this horizon where it just sort of drops off like a flat earth, pretty much. I think it looks much better when you have these mountains. I also wanted these mountains to be very different to the types of mountains that are around Montana, like the Montana and Marble Mountain, and even different to Marble Mountain. So I wanted them to look a little bit more eroded, a bit more weathered. I wanted there to be more exposed rock as well, so you can actually see quite a lot of exposed rock on these mountains. That was done intentionally. I wanted them to feel a little bit more barren as well, so trying to figure out the best techniques to have that, because again, I probably had too much exposed rock, and I sort of stripped that back a little bit just by smoothing out a bit of the surface, mostly around the base, because that's usually where a lot of the soil, a lot of the runoff from the mountain sort of sits, so it creates a bit more of a gradual slope, whereas when you get closer to the peaks, that's usually where the rock and the steeper inclines are usually at least the types of mountains I was looking at. So this is where they really start coming alive. I go a little bit too hard with the little shrubs that I place down on these things. I end up reducing them. You won't see that in a live play, but in the next episode, I do reduce them quite a lot, because I actually found out that it actually looks a lot better if you use very little amounts of foliage rather than, you know, trying to make the entire mountain have foliage on it. It kind of doesn't look as realistic. It's sort of weird. It's one of those things where you add too much detail and too much realism and it looks less realistic, whereas if you did a little less, it actually looks much better. So I end up reducing the amount of foliage, even though these mountains are actually full of shrubs, full of bushes. Instead, I just pretty much go with just the bare minimum. You'll see a bit more of that a little later on. And also using the resource textures, again, using such a slight amount on it, and trying not to just get discouraged, because it's really easy to go, well, at least I was getting very discouraged, just thinking, oh man, these mountains are never going to look right. I'd put like some resources on it, like some of the ground textures, and it still would look really bad. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna give up. But you're just gonna go really slow, and even putting down those ground textures using resources, yeah, they just weren't coming out how I wanted it. It didn't come to life how I expected it, but I just had to go really slow and just do little certain parts, and eventually it becomes way more realistic. So now I'm working on like a bigger mountain that sits It's really far away from Montana. It sits right on the border of the map. You actually can't see this mountain when I have clouds enabled, but when I usually have, because I kind of switch between the two depending on what I'm doing. But when I have no clouds enabled, I can see this mountain quite clearly, and it's probably one of my favorite mountains I've created. It's really nicely detailed. I think the scale is really well done, and I just love it. I think it looks great. And there's also like this valley that I've created, which I'm gonna get into. So like, letting you know that parts of this is going to be detailed and totally set up, and then other parts we're going to get to another stage. So much like I did when I first created this map, I create areas that I know I'm going to get to straight away, and that way I might detail them a lot because I'm going to get to them straight away. And then some areas I'm like, well, you know what, we're going to revisit this in like 6 months or even longer, and then we'll talk about what this is going to look like. Sometimes I don't even get to those areas, so it's kind of like I'm not going to go to full detail and then not get to it, or go to full detail and then totally change my mind. So I created this really cool valley. I'm pretty keen to get back there at some stage, having a lot of exposed rock, make it a bit more of a national park, but not so much for like trees and stuff. It's more of one of those national parks that have like a lot of exposed rock, quite mountainous, and quite desolate as well. I think it would be really quite cool. Maybe even a little town. But yeah, gotta try not to do too many towns in Marble Mountain, otherwise it won't feel quite as expansive. I think that's the key. Gotta be really careful. And I think that's where the mountains really help, because it means then you can hide a lot of those towns behind the mountains. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm creating a lot of driving videos for this series. I can't remember if I'm gonna release any before. I don't know, basically I'm recording a lot as I'm going. They take a really long time to record. I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but I'm going to keep on going. But basically, I record a lot of these driving videos, and they take maybe like 3-4 hours to record, because I'm recording at like 1 frame per second. So it's pretty much like if I'm going to go see a movie, or if I'm going out for the day, I'll set all the scene up, I'll press record, I'll go out, I'll do stuff, I'll come back and see what it turned out like. And then I speed it up by like 4,000 or something like that, just to give a bit of insight to what I'm doing. So a lot of those driving videos are coming, and that's half the reason why I've even created this series in the first place, so I can create that sort of immersion with making those road trips and the types of journeys you take when you go through these sort of states, you know, because even in Australia, when you drive long distance, drive for like 5-6 hours or whatever, and you drive through so many different towns, you like the transition from city to the outskirts, to the farmlands, to the deserts, to the, you know, I love those sort of things. It's really quite interesting, and I want to do that in Marble Mountain, and I'm really loving this little transition that we're doing, which is, so this is the part that I was talking about. This is the area that I've actually detailed really quite heavily, because I wanted to get a really good sense of how I can make that transition from this desert to what is quite a temperate environment, and, you know, being this redwood forest. And I thought that in order to create this road that was going to get there, I thought, you know, the more realistic way of creating these sort of roads that take on these huge journeys through these mountainsides. Generally, these sort of roads take the path of a valley, and you know, because that way they don't have to climb the entire mountain. Sometimes they will climb mountains, sometimes they don't. Most of the time they go through the valleys. So I thought, okay, fine, we'll create a valley, we'll have this road going through, and then I thought, well, if there's a valley, then there's probably going to be some sort of water source. So then I've created this river that's also going through. I'm using these Mac Walshman rivers, but I end up changing this. I end up getting rid of it. That's what I'm trying to say. And I instead create my own version of it, because I find it I didn't really need that network there, so I get rid of that. And also just another excuse to drag another train line. I did this more for aesthetics reasons. I thought it just looks awesome, but also it serves as a commuter train, which is what I want it to be for. I want it to be more for commuter transport to this town that we're going to build ages away. We're not going to build this for a long time. But yeah, we're going to have this commuter train that goes through here, and I guess some freight will also use it. But there will be another train line. So you know that bridge that crosses the river, and I used to go to the sawmill. Well, that's going to go through a tunnel going underneath this mountainside and then go inside this valley. So there's going to be 2 different train lines serving sort of different purposes. So now what I'm up to is, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? You don't really know what I'm doing. Well, what I'm up to is, I thought rather than just dragging out these roads straight up, because they take a little bit more efforts to do and, you know, trying to figure out the different layers and stuff, I thought I might just map out everything that I want to create in this area by just using the ground textures, the resources to see where things are going to go. I create a very ugly looking mountain. I understand that's very ugly looking. And just to get a bit of a sense of where things are going to go, so that I know where to place roads, where to place mountains before creating them and then realizing they look awful. So that's what I was sort of going for. And just see now how much room we have. Like we have so much room to actually create things. And this lake that I end up placing down here, oh man, it's just so nice. It's so picturesque. I also, this town is going to be so nice. So this is the town that I thought I was going to be placing, you know, the prison that I created again near the bridge that I was just referencing, but that whole area, I thought I was going to have a little town down there, but like, I don't know why I was thinking of putting a town down there. First of all, there's no space, and second of all, I don't know why I thought that would be a good spot for a town, because there's so much more room on this map. I don't know why everything has to be so squished together. I really squished things together around Copper Falls, but I really didn't need to. So now I'm starting to spread out a little bit more, starting to think about where other things are going to go, because again, we're going for journeys, we're going for road trips, we're going for the types of landscapes and towns and, you know, what it feels like when you cross a whole region or when you cross a country. It changes so much, and I want to go for that. So placing down that little town so close to Copper Falls and Sabine and even Montana, yeah, just crazy. I don't know what I was thinking. So instead, that town is now like super far away, which makes sense. So that's gonna be great. Okay, now I want to talk about these rocks. These rocks are really, really cool. These were created by Grey Flame, who has gone and created a whole bunch of different rock collections. You go and check them out on the Steam Workshop. And we're basically going to get some Marble Mountain rocks that are going to fit with the Springwood texture pack, which is phenomenal. So thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate it, which you already know that. But basically, these are some rocks. I'm testing them out in this area. They're probably a little bit too white because they're probably meant for a more coastline sort of area. Though I do sort of like that they are a different color to the rest of the area. So let me know what you think of them. Like if you think I should go for something that matches with the Marble Mountain / Springwood texture of the cliffs, then maybe I will. Maybe I'll change them. But I sort of like that they're a little bit of a different color. You know, because I do plan to have different colored rocks in Marble Mountain. That's sort of the whole reason why I've gone for these ones. There's actually a whole bunch of other ones, and I'm sort of tempted to go for them too. So I don't know, let me know what you think, but I really love these rocks. It's sort of like I'm going for must-have assets if I'm ever going to download anything extra for Marble Mountain. And because we are doing so many different landscape and different environments, doing a lot of nature stuff in Marble Mountain, not just city stuff. So things like this are an absolute must-have, including trees, which I'm plopping down a whole bunch of them right now. So this is where the transition between the desert and this this pinewood forest really takes shape. Basically, what I wanted to do is, you know, being a valley anyway, I thought, okay, let's create this really lush and green area. You know, it's going to be quite green anyway, a lot of foliage, even in like a desert sort of environment. I did a lot of looking on Google Maps, actually going down a street view and just checking out some of the different highways and seeing like how the rivers sort of interact with the landscape and how the tree, like the sort of foliage. It's actually a really good technique to get an idea of what sort of foliage is around these sort of areas. And I was basing this off one highway. I can't remember the name of the highway. You guys probably know it. Actually, pretty sure a whole bunch of you guys live around San Francisco or even around these sort of areas. So let me know if you are, because yeah, I would really love your opinions, because that is generally what I'm going for. So getting ideas from that sort of landscape, I found it was really, really helpful, and it just sort of made it much easier to figure out what that was going to look like. And because there's already a whole bunch of trees in this area, you know, just making that transition from these sort of like lower shrubs to the pine trees, it actually wasn't too difficult, which was nice because I was worried it was not going to look very seamless. You might also be able to tell that the ground texture too has transitioned very slightly to a much greener type of color from the desert area. But you know, most of the desert, it's not just total brown. Like I'm trying to mix it up with a bit of green too, using just like very slight increments with the brush texture, because that basically allows you to just expose those different colors without just going either full green or full brown. You get a bit of a mix, which is quite nice. I'm so obsessed with how this area turned out. It just makes you really excited to start working in these areas, and you can sort of see how Marble Mountain really isn't just about the city. Like a lot of people are asking me, hey, when are you going to do the other side of the city? When are you going to work on the airport? I'm actually sort of more interested in these areas at the moment. Because I have done so much work around here, and because I'm doing a lot of terraforming and working on some towns, I will be inclined to go back into the city to work on some more smaller projects, because there are a bunch of projects I want to work on and get finished up. But yeah, in terms of like the airport, I mean, we're a little while away from that. There's a few more other things that I want to do before getting right into that project. Now, back in the desert, figuring out where the main highways are going to go, just so they give me access to lots of really cool areas. And also just figuring out how the mountains around the outskirts of the map are going to look too, because they're really important. You know, really hate that just flat edge. It looks so much better when you have this mountains on the side of the map. I think it's way better. So I do plan to figure that out a little bit later on, but you know, just place down a couple of mountains just to see how it looks, and then we'll work on the rest of them at another stage. Also train lines, figuring out where they're going to go, and you know, these are the sort of things I should have probably figured out a while ago. I guess I did, but you know, things change, opinions, ideas change. The scope of this project has changed for me as well. So where I thought I was going to be placed in towns, where I thought I was going to be having deserts and mountains, have actually changed as well. So you know, that's kind of typical, to be honest. Also just place down a couple of pre-built intersections. I rarely build my own intersections, to be honest. Like if it's on the workshop and it's done better than I will do it, then I'll just totally download it. So yeah, don't expect any intersections from me. Every now and again I might build one, but like typically not so much. But that is it for the time lapse. I'm going to get into the live play. I'm going to show you a little bit better detail of the things that I was up to. You probably missed a whole bunch of stuff in this quick build. All right, let's get into it. Okay, mountains in 3, 2, 1. How good are that? They're so good from this angle. I really like them like this. I think they just look really great with the deserts and with the prison, and I just think that's perfect. So that's what we're going for. We're going for that really eroded look, like exposed rock, a little bit of foliage, but they're just quite weathered and looking pretty good in that, amongst that horizon too. So we're going to continue this horizon a little bit further along, but you know, that's much later on down the track. Let's talk about the things that we have done rather than the things we are going to do later. So the mountains, the reason why this range works so well is they just create that really nice natural barrier between desert and the pine forest that we're going to create. I really like that it's a mountain range, because we don't really have any mountain ranges in Marble Mountain at the moment. We have like mountains, but we don't have a range. So now we finally do. This is that mountain that I really liked. I think that just worked really, really well. I don't know. The combination just worked. So I don't know what I did, but hopefully I can do it again. But, you know, just from all these sort of angles around here, I just think that mountain range just works really, really well, just to hide a bit of this. And of course, you're going to see bits of it, but I kind of like that too. You know, Marble Mountain is still the highest by far. And there's also, I don't think I talked about this in the time-lapse, but a lot of false perspective in this map. And you kind of have to do that. Marble Mountain is just enormous. Like, it is an enormous mountain. And these feel quite big when you are close to them. You know, like they feel like a big mountain. They feel like a big mountain range. And they sort of look far away too, because you've got these trees on here and you're thinking, okay, these are big trees and they look dwarfed towards compared to the mountains, but these trees are actually like pretty much, they're like tiny bushes. So they're actually not as big as you expect. So for instance, if I was to place down like a regular sized tree, let's say like this, it's much bigger. So I try to like use only small trees when I'm creating these mountains, because otherwise they just make the mountains look a little bit too small. See what I mean? So these trees are actually quite small, but from afar, it just gives the illusion that the mountain range is much bigger than it really is. Whereas Marble Mountain is actually like, that's pretty much the top of the height limit of the map. So that kind of gives you a bit of an idea of how tall it is. All right, so let's go on a bit of a journey to Serrano Valley. And my intention for this build was that you could see like a little bit of Serrano Valley coming from this angle over here, but generally it doesn't look so much like you're going to be going into some big forest. It's still quite hidden. It's mostly just these mountains and the valley. Over here, you can see a little bit more greenery, a couple of little trees, bigger trees actually. But generally it's pretty hidden. So you start making your way through. The road is quite windy, which was intentional. I like that it's really windy because you do get these like areas where you can't actually see pretty much anything except for a couple of trees, but that's about it. But they sort of wind around, going mostly around the contours of this valley, but sometimes cutting into the edges, so you can see like a bit of the train line is cut into the mountainside too. This is where we start getting to the exposed rock, which this rock work works really well like that. You can get some more exposed different types of rock. Again, let me know what you think about these ones, whether I should go for something a bit of a different color, because there's a whole bunch of different ones I can choose from. So you don't really start seeing these big pine trees until this one over here, and that's about halfway through this valley. We're starting to get more foliage, we're starting to get bigger trees as well, but I mean, it really doesn't start taking shape into a forest until about here. Going for more clusters, I mean, clusters are, I don't know, they just feel more realistic, even though it's not that realistic. It's just one of those things. And then you can start seeing, I mean, it's really starting to unfold as this big forest. And then I can't wait. It's going to be this big opening when you sort of like turn this corner, and then you can just imagine this really cool lake here, this big mountain, this whole mountainside actually, that's going to look really nice. And then this road's going to take like a left-hand turn, and it's going to take you on a bit of a trip around this mountain here, and the lake's going to be around here as well. So, I mean, it's going to look so nice when it's finished. Yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be great. Then I'm thinking the town's going to go around here. That's sort of big. Like, I might go a little bit smaller than that. That's bigger than... I mean, that's about the same size as Copper Falls, so we'll see how big this thing pans out. I think the main center of it's going to be like this, and then, you know, be a bit of farmland. But it's going to be like a real tourist destination. Kind of imagine what it's going to look like. I wanted to put this there. You can see how crazy that is now, right? Instead, I think this road would be way cooler if it just like sort of went around here. Maybe turn into a bit of a dirt road as it went along the valley that's going to sit around here too. You can see how much more space we have now that we, you know, expanded out things, just shuffled over that mountain a little bit. We'll still have some big mountains around here, but generally that's going to be like pushed around here. We don't really want to take away from the grandness of Marble Mountain. We want it to all be pretty, yeah, it's kind of like just supporting Marble Mountain, if you know what I mean. Plenty of mountains, but big old granddaddy over there. And then like the nice thing is it's going to make this whole section more of this like mountainous area, whereas before it was kind of like this one mountain here and these were like hills. Now it's going to be this big mountainous area, which I can't wait for. But do let me know what you think. Next episode we are going to be working around this area and working on this mountain. It just turns out so great. I can't wait to show you guys. But you have to wait till next weekend. Until then, have a great week. And I'll see you in the next video. See you later.